My name is Melody. I'm 35 years old, currently living in Austin, Texas, and I work in cybersecurity investigations. One night, just before 2 a.m., while the city was still wrapped in silence, I received an unusual alert from the system. A transaction of nearly $8,000 had been processed at the Paris airport. At first, I thought it was a hacker from Europe. But when I traced the IP address and checked the security cameras in my home, my heart nearly stopped. The person who made the transaction was my own husband. Ryan, the man I had once trusted with everything, had stolen my identity, turning me into a victim of the very person who had shared my bed for 7 years. Have you ever been shamelessly betrayed by the one you trusted most? If this story speaks to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe to the channel to follow the whole truth, because what happened next was far more ruthless. I still remember the first time I met Ryan. He showed up at an investment seminar in downtown Austin, dressed sharply, ash-gray tie, warm smile that seemed to soften the entire room. He introduced himself as an independent market analyst, specializing in strategic consulting for emerging tech investment funds. His voice was calm, deliberate, his eyes knew how to listen. Someone who had grown used to the logic-driven, data-heavy world, was unexpectedly drawn to how he made complicated things feel accessible and full of promise. We started dating not long after that. Ryan always made me feel heard, seen. He never demanded, never asked how much I made, never pried into my work. Instead, he talked about projects he was pursuing, contacts in New York, business trips to San Francisco to meet with partners. Each story carried a hint of glamour, a touch of fantasy that I naively mistook for ambition. When he proposed after a year of dating, I said yes without hesitation. We had a small, simple wedding, no frills. Ryan said he wanted to save money to invest in our future. That made sense to me. I've always been practical. I never dreamed of princess gowns or grand receptions. All I ever wanted was someone willing to walk beside me. That was enough. 7 years later, sitting in that same house, I realized Ryan hadn't worked a real day in his life. He could disappear all day under the excuse of meeting investors, but never had anything tangible to show for it. Every time I asked about a contract or income, he'd brush it off with a chuckle or compliment me. "You're already doing so well, why stress?" At first it felt like trust. But over time his constant evasion began to stir a deep unease in me. There was a time I suggested opening a joint account for convenience. Ryan nodded, then never brought it up again. I asked if he had any debt. He simply shook his head. "I don't spend nearly as much as you think. Just need you and a few books." His voice was light, but it hit something inside me. I grew up in a household where my parents controlled every penny I spent, every choice I made. Maybe that's why when Ryan stayed hands-off, I felt relief. I mistook disengagement for trust. Then I became consumed by my work at the National Cybersecurity Center. Projects got bigger, my income more stable. I didn't pay much attention to small account fluctuations, assuming they were monthly expenses. Ryan still cooked dinners, brought roses every weekend, watched movies with me at home. He painted a picture of normalcy, one so pretty no one dared look too closely. Until the night I received the bank alert that pulled me out of the dream. When I checked my transaction history, I saw my secondary card had been used for a series of Amazon orders. Then the primary card showed a swipe for a flight to Paris. In a panic, I dug deeper. And I discovered it wasn't just one card. It was 3. One of them wasn't even a card I opened. I immediately accessed my personal credit report. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the living room floor. There were 2 new loan applications opened under my name in the past 3 months. One through a local bank, the other via an online lending platform. The total amount? $120,000. The applications used my real email, my home address, and forged signatures that were sophisticated enough to pass regular checks. And the person who submitted the paperwork? Ryan. Somehow, he had stolen scanned copies of my driver's license, my social security number, and my digital signature from my personal computer. The very things I thought were encrypted. The bitter irony? I'm the one who teaches companies how to secure identity data and prevent fraud. What I felt wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. The man I had shared my life and my trust with turned me into the perfect fraud target. I didn't cry. It wasn't pain. It felt like my logic was being torn apart at the seams. Ryan didn't just lie. He took everything I spent my life building. My name, my credibility, my sense of safety. I sat there, under the dim light of the table lamp, listening to the hum of the air conditioner cutting through the night, and asked myself, how much more was hidden behind these walls? I didn't know the full answer. But I swore I would find out. Ryan didn't just take my money. He awakened a version of me that would not stay silent. Not anymore. I didn't scream or break down like the movies say you should when you've been betrayed. I just sat still in the quiet darkness of my kitchen, gripping my coffee mug that still held the afternoon's warmth. Outside, the streetlights cast a golden blur across the damp pavement. Inside, I wasn't crying, I was sharpening. I powered on my computer, opened a private encryption tool I normally used for teaching advanced courses on spotting irregular financial patterns. It had never been used for personal reasons. But Ryan had already obliterated every boundary I once respected. I accessed the system, linked tracking IDs to every card, every loan account. Then I activated Blackstream, an internal tool used for real-time monitoring and analysis of global financial fraud patterns. Every transaction Ryan made, from a coffee at the airport to a night in a luxury hotel, now showed up on my dashboard with GPS coordinates, precise timestamps, facial data logs, and even behavioral markers for repeated spending habits. He had no idea that I was inside every luxurious step he took. I needed backup. And only one name came to mind. Lena Harper, my closest friend from college, now a senior investigator with the Federal Financial Crimes Bureau. I called her just before 7 a.m., knowing she always rose before her alarm. Her voice came on, clear and sharp as always. Melody? You're calling before 7. What's going on? Ryan. I swallowed hard. He scammed me. Used my identity to open loans, maxed out my credit cards. And now he's in Paris. Lena paused for exactly 3 seconds. Do you have proof? I've got everything. Transactions, IP logs, home camera footage, even a snapshot of the fake passport he's using. Send everything through the internal secure link. I'll open a federal case. But if it's Ryan, I remember you once said he wasn't smart enough to run something complex. I took a deep breath. So did I. But turns out after 7 years he learned to fake it so well he fooled even me. Lena didn't ask further questions. She sent me a direct bureau link for sensitive data upload. No extra verification required. Within 2 hours we had an initial 3-person task force, all of whom had worked with me on international fraud prevention cases before. Ryan didn't even try to hide the trail. He used my real personal information, but booked a first-class ticket to Paris under the alias Nathan Avery. In Venice, he rented a private yacht and paid using a secondary credit card opened from one of the forged loan profiles. In Monaco, he stayed at a seaside boutique hotel, booked high-end spa packages, and ordered vintage wine at nearly $5,000 a bottle. I watched every transaction light up my dashboard, not missing a beat. I couldn't help but imagine him sitting on a hotel balcony, champagne in hand, convincing himself he was finally living the life he deserved. He thought he'd gotten away. Thought I'd never find out. But he forgot something important. I'm not the kind of woman who just endures. I'm the woman who built the very systems that corporations use to catch criminals like him. And I was using that system to expose him. 3 days later, a special data flag popped up. Ryan had used the identity Nathan Avery to attend an investment conference in Geneva. That detail caught me off guard. He wasn't just spending lavishly, he was actively building an image as a successful investor. At one networking dinner, he even left behind a business card that read, Managing Partner, Avery Global Capital. I almost laughed when I saw the photo a contact in the banking security network sent me. Ryan stood in the hotel lobby wearing a navy blue suit, wine glass in hand, grinning smugly. He had no idea that his every step, every word, every transaction was already tagged and stored in the global surveillance map. I sent an updated report to Lena with a short note. He's constructing a new persona. We need to act soon. Lena called me back within 10 minutes. I've got approval from above. If he re-enters the US, we can issue an emergency summons. But if you're on board, I can escalate this to international coordination. This case is big enough to bring in Interpol. I nodded. Do it. He thinks he's smarter than me. But he has no clue that every second he spends inside that illusion is a second I'm drafting his indictment. Lena paused, then said slowly, Melody, I've never heard you talk like this. I closed my eyes. I've never been pushed far enough to become this version of myself. A breeze drifted through the slightly open window, nudging the curtains. I stared out at the pale gray sky, clouds gliding by like time itself. I didn't know exactly when Ryan would return, but I knew he would. People like him always think they can come back, toss a few sweet words around, and everything will be fine. What he didn't realize was that waiting for him this time wasn't a soft-hearted wife. It was a cybersecurity expert ready to call checkmate. That afternoon, as I combed through transaction logs to prep my next update for Lena, my phone rang. An unknown number from France. I hesitated, then picked up. A light but tense female voice came through on the other end. "Excuse me, am I speaking with Melody Miller?" I furrowed my brow. "Yes, this is she." "Who's calling?" The woman took an audible deep breath as if gathering her thoughts. "My name is Jessica Laurent. I work at Le Beaufort Hotel in Nice. I'm not sure how to start this. But, do you happen to know someone named Ryan Avery?" I kept calm. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Her voice stalled for a moment and then, almost in a whisper, "You're legally his wife, aren't you?" That question hit like a punch to the chest. There was a heartbeat of silence before I answered slowly. "Yes, I'm his wife. And I think you've just told me something very important." Jessica went silent for a few more seconds, then spoke in a panic. "Oh God, I didn't know. He said he was single, a founder of an investment fund in New York." I believed him. "He's been here for over 3 days, staying in one of our luxury suites under the name Nathan Avery. I only got suspicious when his passport seemed off. And then I looked him up online and found you." I leaned back in my chair, the world slowing around me. "Jessica, do you know what's going on here?" I asked softly. "I know I've been deceived. And I think you've been deceived far worse than I have." I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Jessica, I don't blame you. If a man like Ryan could deceive me for 7 years, it makes perfect sense that he fooled you in just a few days. But I need your help." "I'll do whatever I can," she replied almost instantly. "Thank you. Listen, Ryan is under investigation by the Federal Financial Crimes Bureau. I've been tracking him since I found out he used my identity and finances for cross-border fraud." I heard Jessica gasp. I don't even know what to say. "It's okay," I said. "You called me. That means you're on the right side." I stood up and walked to the window, my tone growing firmer. "I need you to keep him in Nice for as long as possible. Can you do that?" Jessica hesitated briefly, then replied, "I think I can. I'm the head concierge, so I can delay certain processes, suggest more services, or simply stall using excuses like maintenance checks. And if needed, I can pretend I still don't know." "Perfect," I said, feeling like I'd just secured a vital piece in my plan. "What do you need me to do next?" Jessica asked. "I'll send your information to the federal investigator on this case. Her name is Lena Harper. She'll coordinate directly with local authorities in France, working with Nice police to prepare the next step." Jessica seemed to breathe easier. "I just hope he doesn't suspect anything. Ryan always thinks women aren't smart enough to catch on to his schemes. Which is exactly why he's now being cornered by both of us." Jessica paused. "Are you hurt? I mean, knowing your husband had someone else." I let out a dry laugh. One without bitterness, just weariness. "I'm not hurt because he had someone else. I'm hurt because I spent so long believing in someone who never really existed." Jessica didn't say anything else. I could hear the soft hum of a ceiling fan in the background from her end. Then she spoke again quietly. "Thank you for not being angry with me. No. Thank you for calling. Most people would have stayed silent. But you didn't. And that matters." After hanging up, I immediately sent all the information, the call recording and the location of Le Beaufort Hotel to Lena with a message. "We've got someone on the inside. She can keep Ryan in Nice a few more days. Activate coordination with French police." The reply came almost instantly, initiating contact with local authorities. That concierge is gold. I sat down, eyes fixed on the map of Europe open on my screen. From Paris to Venice and now to Nice. Each city a footprint of betrayal and each one a key link in the plan to flip the board. I wouldn't let Ryan vanish like a shadow. I had the light. I had insiders. And I was in control of every breath inside the luxurious life he thought was untouchable. I remember clearly those days spent preparing the perfect trap, tense but filled with purpose. The mix of anticipation and satisfaction from knowing I was about to turn the tables made my heart race. I couldn't let Ryan know I was watching his every move, nor how carefully I had constructed the entire plan. With his birthday approaching, I decided to send a decoy gift, but it would be the most important tool in the mission. A counterfeit Rolex, customized with a hidden GPS tracker and micro audio recorder. A tech friend of mine built it specifically for this operation. The watch looked so real it was nearly impossible to tell it was fake, but it ensured I could track him anywhere and record every word and move, without him suspecting a thing. The gift was delivered to Ryan through an international express courier service, with the sender's name listed as a secret admirer. I didn't want him to know it was from me right away. I wanted the surprise, but more importantly, I wanted to observe his genuine reaction upon receiving it. The moment Ryan opened the box, I was already monitoring from a distance using the GPS tracker. My heart tightened when I saw him cradle the watch, smirking with pride. He immediately posted a photo of the watch on social media with the caption, "Thank you, mysterious fan. This is the best birthday gift I've ever received. Life truly begins now." I smiled quietly to myself. I hadn't expected him to flaunt the counterfeit watch so quickly online. But that was exactly what opened the door for me to collect even more evidence. Just a few hours later, my phone rang. Ryan's name lit up on the screen. His voice was full of pride and excitement. "Melody, you won't believe this. I finally feel like I'm living the life I deserve. Everything's different now that I can spend freely like this," he said, his voice echoing from a cozy hotel suite somewhere on the Mediterranean coast. I silently hit record. Every word, every brag, every unintentional confession became another puzzle piece in the bigger picture of his fraud. "You know," he continued, "all those years I felt trapped. Living under the name Ryan Miller in small-town America, but I'm really Nathan Avery. A man not bound by anyone, not limited by anything. Now I can do whatever I want." I bit back my anger and let him speak uninterrupted. His words sliced through me like blades, but they were also needles, pulling threads from the tangled web of lies he thought were hidden. "I know you weren't happy with all the secrets between us. I wasn't perfect either, but I did what I had to do to escape that cycle. Now I've got everything, or at least more than I ever dreamed of," he added, his voice practically glowing with self-satisfaction. "I recorded everything. His tales of first-class flights, lavish parties, and luxury goods bought with my money." When the call ended, I hit stop on the recorder and looked out the window. The sun was setting behind the skyscrapers of Austin, casting a red glow across my office. I knew that every second Ryan spent hiding in that hotel room, he was walking straight into the trap I had set. That fake watch, the recordings, they would become irrefutable evidence. Not just financial transactions, but his own voice, publicly admitting everything. I didn't need excuses or hollow apologies. I just needed the truth. And justice. This game had never been simple. But now the odds were fully in my favor. Ryan, lost in his false confidence, had no idea I was tracking his every move, listening to every word. I stood and paced the room. The soft yellow light from the ceiling couldn't dim the heat of the fury that had long since turned into focused strength. The fake watch wasn't just a birthday present. It was the key to my freedom. And I wouldn't stop until Ryan paid for all the hurt and betrayal he left in his wake. Deep down, I knew revenge wouldn't bring peace. But fairness would. The power to rise after being knocked down, to live life on my own terms. That was what I wanted. And I smiled. This journey, long and difficult, was ultimately a journey back to myself. I was sitting in my office in Austin, hands on the keyboard, but my eyes couldn't leave the window. Summer sunlight poured through the glass, stretching long across the unfinished case files on my desk. A notification timed from my computer. I turned back to the screen. Ryan was temporarily detained at Nice Airport. French police flagged suspicious credit card activity. But since he used the alias Nathan Avery, he was released after 3 hours. Lena's message popped up in the secure window. I wasn't surprised. I knew it was only a matter of time before he got caught. But the fact that he had crafted a false identity sophisticated enough to bypass international screening sent a chill down my spine. Ryan wasn't just an unemployed dreamer anymore. He was a calculated con artist, skilled at covering his tracks, capable of building an entire false persona. Lena sent a follow-up attachment: a hotel registration form, transaction receipts, surveillance photos from the airport, and Ryan's initial statement, all under the name Nathan Avery, an American national from Boston, occupation, venture capital executive. I typed back a short reply: urgent request to transfer case to Interpol. Lena responded in less than a minute. On it. International watch list will update within 36 hours. I stood and walked into the smaller study next door where I kept the family's important documents. On the wooden shelf, an old photo frame caught my eye. My mother standing in the lavender garden behind the house in Wimberley, holding me as a teenager. That house, the only inheritance she left behind after dying of cancer 3 years ago, was still in my name. It had always been my weekend escape from the chaos of city life. I remembered every detail: the oak cabinets, the kitchen table where she'd sit reading, the birdsong each morning from the trees in the backyard. I opened the file drawer, pulled out the original deed, and logged into the Hayes County Property Database. When the search results appeared, I froze. The house had been transferred. Seller, Melody Miller. Buyer, Adam Trenholm. Transfer date, 2 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. I hadn't authorized any sale. I hadn't signed anything, granted any power of attorney, or agreed to sell that property. Someone had used my name, and worse, had fooled the local notary office. I immediately called the Wimberley Land Records office. A woman named Alice answered. "This is Melody Miller. I need to verify a property transaction, file number 388WI, for the house on Cedar Ridge Road." Alice's voice was hesitant. "Yes, Miss Miller. According to our system, the deed transfer was completed. All documents are in order, notarized. Is there a problem?" "I never signed anything," I replied, my voice shaking with anger. "I never sold that house. Can you send me a copy of the signed file?" "Of course. I'll email it to the address you registered in the system." I checked my inbox almost immediately. A PDF loaded with all the paperwork: the transfer request, notarization page, photo ID, and the signature, mine. The signature was so convincing it gave me chills. He had used a scan from my old personal files to forge a perfect copy. I called Lena right away. "You're not going to believe this," I said, my voice nearly breaking. "He sold my mother's house. Under my name. With a fake signature." There was a sharp curse on the other end of the line. "Melody, this is beyond credit card fraud. This is full-scale legal forgery." "I know," I said, trying to stay calm. "That house wasn't just property. It was the only thing my mother left me." Lena was quiet for a few seconds. "I'll add this to the expanded case file. Given how elaborate this is and the financial scale involved, Ryan could be facing both federal and state-level charges." I closed my eyes, trying to stop the tears building up. What I felt wasn't just pain or rage. It was a sharp sense of loss, mixed with a silent vow that this time, I would not let him disappear like he had before. I reopened the audio files from the fake watch. Ryan's voice played, boastful, smug, bragging about his resourcefulness, his investment skills, and his smart moves in liquidating assets he claimed he didn't need. He thought he'd calculated everything. He thought he'd always get away with it. What he didn't know was that I had already been one step ahead of him. I saved all the documents, signature scans, voice recordings, and buyer information into an encrypted folder. I named it, Wimberley, The End is Coming. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight fall on the corner of the wooden table in my apartment where I now lived alone. I no longer felt betrayed. I only felt one thing: ready. And if Ryan thought this ended with a few credit cards, he was about to find out he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Ryan returned to Austin on a Monday morning, the harsh sun baking the apartment's front awning until the air itself seemed to shimmer. He didn't call ahead. Didn't act cautious. On the contrary, he walked in like he owned the place. White shirt sleeves rolled up, a gleaming Rolex on his wrist, and a designer suitcase dragging behind him from the international terminal. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, a steaming cup of tea in hand. "Melody," he began, as if the past 2 weeks were nothing worth mentioning, "Paris just can't compare to the Texas sky." I looked up, meeting his eyes with a calm smile. "Oh, Did you enjoy yourself? He chuckled, stepped closer, holding out his arms as if expecting an embrace. I was going to tell you everything. It was an amazing trip. I might even go back next month. Got an invite to a summit in Geneva. I didn't back away or move toward him. I simply stood, folded my napkin neatly, and picked up my car keys from the table. There's an important dinner tonight. I made a reservation at Claymore, 6:30. You should wear a suit. I assume you still remember how to tie a tie. Ryan frowned, skeptical, but eventually nodded, like he was stepping into a scene he thought he was still starring in. That evening, I wore a long black dress, hair pulled into a high bun, and my mother's pearl earrings. When Ryan arrived in a sharp black jacket and climbed into the car, he still glanced at himself in the mirror with pride, adjusting his collar before casting a smug look my way. Honestly, I did miss you, he said sweetly. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed on the road as city lights began to flicker to life. Claymore was nestled inside a historic marble building downtown, where soft yellow lighting and smooth jazz made time feel slower. A server led us to a private dining room upstairs, where the balcony overlooked 6th Street. Ryan walked in first, puffing his chest out like usual, then stopped cold. 3 people were already seated. Lena Harper, in a deep navy suit, hands resting on a closed file. Beside her, my attorney Anna Goldman, calm but razor-sharp. And across from them, Jessica. Her hair in a neat bun, eyes a little red but steady. She wore a simple white dress, no longer the naive front desk girl Ryan once manipulated. He froze for 2 seconds. Then slowly a smile curled on his lips. He reached out a hand like he was still in control. Well, everyone's here. What a surprise. Lena didn't stand. Just gave him a polite nod. You should sit down, Ryan. I quietly pulled out my chair, placed my purse beside me, and took a seat next to Anna. Ryan hesitated, then sat as well, still trying to act unfazed. So, we're all having dinner? Or is this some kind of intervention? He asked with a forced chuckle, glancing at me. I looked at him, then pulled a small USB from my purse. I plugged it into the tablet on the table and tapped the screen. A voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable. You know, all those years I felt trapped, living under the name Ryan Miller in small-town America. But I'm really Nathan Avery, a man not bound by anyone. Ryan's voice echoed in the silent room, so quiet we could hear the sound of a water glass setting down. His face went pale. His fingers curled slightly on the table. His eyes darted around the room, then stopped at Jessica. She didn't flinch. She just stared at him, nothing left but contempt. I played the second clip, the one where he called home, bragging about selling the house, about financial freedom, and the life he deserved. His tone shifted from excited to shameless, revealing the core of someone who no longer knew what guilt felt like. When the audio stopped, the room was silent again. Ryan leaned back in his chair, confusion giving way to a defensive stare. Honestly, those were just jokes. People say dumb stuff when they're excited. No one takes that seriously. Lena tilted her head and pulled a folder from her bag. Ryan Miller, or Nathan Avery, you're currently under investigation for at least 5 formal charges: financial fraud, identity theft, asset misappropriation, forged documentation, and federal-level fraud. We've been working with authorities in France, Italy, and Switzerland. What you just heard is only a fraction of what we've gathered. Jessica spoke clearly. I've also filed a separate report with the NICE police for identity fraud and breach of trust. Ryan looked at me like he still hoped I'd be the one to pull him out of the mud. Melody, are you really going through with this? Over a few misunderstandings. I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of water and gently set the glass back down. You think I'm just going to let all this slide? You think I'm still the woman standing in the kitchen waiting for you to come home from your shady little trips? I looked him straight in the eye. You stole my money, my identity, my memories with my mother, and the trust one spent a lifetime learning to give someone. And you're calling that a misunderstanding? Ryan glanced at Lena, then at Anna. But every face at that table remained silent. There was no way out now. And he knew it, clearly. The sound of handcuffs echoed behind Ryan the moment he stepped out of the restaurant. 2 plainclothes federal agents approached, reading him his Miranda rights in a steady, even tone, as if it were just another task on a long list. Ryan struggled for a few seconds, his eyes darting toward me in disbelief. He shouted, Melody. This is a joke, right? You can't do this to me. But I didn't move. Lena stood beside me, her gaze like steel, while attorney Anna calmly pulled out her phone to log the exact time of arrest. 3 days later, a preliminary hearing was held at the federal courthouse in Austin. I walked into the courtroom wearing a charcoal gray suit, my hair neatly pinned up. Sitting in the plaintiff's seat, my heart was pounding, not from fear but because for the first time in years, I was facing everything head-on without flinching. Across the aisle, Ryan appeared gaunt and hollow, stripped of his usual gloss. He wore the orange jumpsuit of the detention center, his hands marked from the cuffs, hair disheveled, eyes vacant. He was no longer the man who used to stand in my kitchen in a crisp white shirt, dreaming of luxury. He was now a defendant, staring down 7 federal charges. Judge Elizabeth Norwood presided over the hearing. She entered the courtroom with a stern, decisive air. Small in stature but commanding in voice, the room fell silent within seconds. The prosecutor went first, listing the charges: financial fraud, forgery of official documents, federal tax evasion, illegal use of personal information to open loans, cross-border money laundering, exploiting a spouse's identity for asset theft, and falsifying real estate paperwork. Each charge came with evidence: audio recordings, transaction histories, phone calls from Paris, even the forged home sale agreement. When it came time for the defense, Ryan's attorney, a man named Charles Grant, stepped up. He took the classic path of those with no escape: blame the victim. Your Honor, Charles began, voice smooth and practiced, my client does not deny that he made mistakes. But these mistakes arose from a cold, disconnected, high-pressure marriage. Melody Miller, the plaintiff, is a successful, strong woman but emotionally distant. For years she showed little concern for her husband's emotional needs. Ryan felt like a ghost in his own marriage. I wasn't surprised. That was always Ryan's move. When cornered, he twisted reality to make it seem like the blame was shared. Then it was Ryan's turn to speak. He stood, hands gripping the back of the chair, eyes fixed on the judge. I don't deny I did wrong, he started, his voice unsteady. But I just wanted to live the life I dreamed of. I wanted freedom, to experience things I couldn't have in this marriage. Melody is an amazing woman, but she lived in a world I could never enter. I felt small, invisible, and so I found a way out. Maybe it was the wrong way, but it was all I had. No one in the room said a word. His speech hung in the air, part plea, part excuse, part self-pity. I took a deep breath. Lena gave my hand a quiet squeeze beneath the table, urging me with her eyes to speak the truth, like I always had. I stood and, with the judge's permission, walked slowly to the witness stand. Adjusting the microphone, I spoke clearly without anger or theatrics. Your Honor, I won't deny I once loved Ryan. I believed I'd found a life partner to build a future with. But I learned something: love can't redeem a person who has no desire to be decent. I turned to look straight at him. You weren't chasing a dream, Ryan. You were freeloading. You used me as an excuse to justify your laziness, your selfishness, your bottomless greed. And the most terrifying thing wasn't the money you took. It was the way you looked me in the eye every day and called me wife, while secretly stripping my life down and selling it piece by piece. Ryan looked away. His head dropped, hands clenched, knuckles white against his pale skin. I turned back to Judge Norwood. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to protect what I've spent my whole life building: my dignity, my work, my faith in justice. I don't want him to do this to another woman, another family. I ask the law to protect me, the way I've been trying to protect myself all this time. Judge Norwood nodded slowly, as if recording every word I said. I returned to my seat, my heartbeat still racing, but it came from something else: release. The hearing continued with witness testimonies, legal filings, and discussions about interim sentencing. I didn't say anything more, just watched silently. In my mind, Ryan wasn't my ex-husband anymore. He was just a man with nothing left but the lies he told himself to avoid facing who he really was. And no one was buying it. I didn't attend Ryan's final sentencing. Lena offered to go in my place, and Anna assured me it wasn't necessary. They were right. I had stood in that courtroom, said everything that needed saying, and looked straight into the eyes that once made me falter. From the moment I walked out of that courtroom, I knew I didn't need to witness anything more to know that justice had spoken. The court sentenced Ryan to 5 years of probation with 1,200 hours of mandatory community service, primarily at centers for financial fraud victims. He was also ordered to return all stolen assets, including cash, property transfers, and any profits gained through fraud. I was restored as the legal owner of my mother's house in Wimberley, my credit accounts were fully reinstated, and I received a settlement for defamation that left me feeling like I owed nothing to the past. Lena texted me a simple message, "It's done." I stared at those words, sitting by the window for nearly 10 minutes. Not because I was thrilled, but because a long-held emptiness inside me was slowly being filled by relief. It felt like a knot I had carried for years had finally been untangled, even if it left behind a scar. I packed up my apartment in Austin in just a few days. No rush, no hesitation. Everything that once tied me to Ryan I sorted carefully. Some items were boxed and donated to local nonprofits, others I tossed in the dumpster behind the parking lot. I didn't cry. With every box I sealed, I felt lighter. This wasn't a goodbye. It was a rebirth. I moved to Colorado on a September morning, just as the first hints of fall brushed the air. The cabin I bought sat nestled among tall pine trees, about a 40-minute drive from Aspen, with sloping grasslands leading to a quiet stream. There was no strong cell signal here, no noisy neighbors, just wind brushing the eaves, the scent of sap, and the absolute silence of nature. The previous owners were an elderly couple moving in with their son in Montana. The wife, Grace, handed me a plum-colored wool blanket she had knitted herself and said, "May your new home bring deep, restful sleep." I held the blanket in my hands and smiled. My heart felt strangely warm, not because of the gift but because of the kindness of a stranger, something I thought I'd forgotten existed. In the early days, I spent most of my time redoing everything in the cabin with my own hands. Repainting the walls, changing the curtains, setting up a small bookshelf near the windowsill where I often read in the afternoons. I planted a few flower beds in front of the porch, even though I knew the mountain climate wouldn't be easy. But I loved the feeling of starting over with nothing but my own two hands. No one to ask, no permission to wait for. At night, I made myself a cup of hot cocoa, played a playlist of classic jazz, and let the soft music wind through the warm wooden corners of the little house. Sometimes I'd sit alone on the balcony, wrapped in the knitted blanket Grace gave me, looking up at the star-filled sky and asking myself, have I truly escaped the past? And then a breeze would drift by, carrying the scent of fresh pine and the sound of the stream trickling below the hill, and I'd answer myself, as long as I don't go back, the past can't catch up. Gradually, I built a new life, simple but full. Every morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee, took a walk around the woods, then returned to my computer to work remotely for a small cybersecurity firm I had previously consulted for. No pressure, no late-night meetings, no 3 a.m. phone calls. Just me, lines of code, doing what I do best in the way I choose. Once, Lena called and asked if I planned to return to Austin. "Not for now," I said, pouring more water into the teapot. "I feel more like myself here." "I get it," she said with a soft laugh. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." "Not just okay. I feel like I'm actually living without enduring anything." One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't dreamed about Ryan for several nights in a row. No more nightmares of betrayal, no more images of him standing in the kitchen smirking among forged documents. Instead, I dreamed of pine forests, of the home my mother once lived in, of that sunny yard I'd once forgotten chasing dreams that never belonged to me. I hung an old photo of my mother on the eastern wall of the cabin, under a pine frame I crafted myself. Every morning when the sunlight streamed through the glass, it landed right on her eyes, filling the room with a warmth from long ago. Life didn't look the same anymore. But it had never felt this real. Every breath, every step across the cool wooden floor, every sip of hot tea I raised to my lips, was a reminder that I was alive, not in someone else's shadow but in the light I chose to walk toward. I received Ryan's letter by mail one morning in early October, when the leaves around the cabin had started turning golden bronze and deep crimson. The envelope was handwritten, that familiar slanted script that once softened my heart now only drew a sigh. No return address, but I didn't need to look to know who it was from. I brought it inside, sat by the wooden table near the window. I hesitated for a few minutes. A part of me wanted to throw it straight into the fireplace, but instead I decided to open it. Maybe to prove to myself that I was now steady enough to read a letter without trembling. Melody, He wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope for understanding. I was wrong, I know that, and I'm trying to make things right every day. I do community service each morning, and at night, all I think about is what I've lost. The only thing I ask is that one day you'll allow me to apologize, in person just once." I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer. I didn't tear it. I didn't reply. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began typing the first lines of a project I had been dreaming about during those long, quiet mountain days. A digital course called Safe from Within, teaching women how to protect their financial well-being in marriages and close relationships. I didn't start with technical terms or encryption models. I began with a single question. Have you ever loved someone so much you gave them everything? Then one day realized they used that love to destroy you. I told my story, not flashy, not cruelly detailed, just enough for students to know they weren't alone. I taught how to spot suspicious financial behavior, how to store and protect information, how to document legally without confrontation. I created a private forum where women could share, ask, and support one another without fear of judgment. The course spread faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, I received hundreds of emails from women everywhere, from teachers, nurses, to full-time homemakers. Some said their husbands had secretly opened credit cards in their names. Some were terrified because their boyfriends were controlling their money. Others had never gone through anything like it but said they were learning just to be prepared. Each message was a quiet voice, and I read every word as if the women were sitting right across from me. One evening, as the air began to turn crisp, I got a short email from a woman named Abigail in her 50s living in Missouri. She wrote, "I've been silent for 30 years. Today I opened my first private account. Thanks to you." I sat still in front of the screen. No medal, no applause could ever match that feeling, knowing that what I had endured wasn't buried, but became light guiding someone else. The next day, I wrote a letter by hand, folded it carefully, and sent it through my attorney with instructions to deliver it to Ryan officially. I didn't use harsh words. I didn't dance around it. I simply wrote, "There is no place for you in this life anymore. I do not hate you, but I also do not need your apology. I have forgiven, but only to free myself from you, not to invite you back. Do not write again, do not try to see me, do not appear. Sometimes the price of freedom is not forgetting, but knowing exactly who hurt you, and still choosing to walk away without turning back." I signed my name, then gently sealed the envelope. That night, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in the old knitted blanket Grace had given me, holding a glass of red wine. In front of me, the mountains faded into the glowing orange of the fall sunset. The breeze was light, just enough to hear the leaves brushing together and the distant call of a lone owl echoing across the ridge. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the wine sliding down my throat, my eyes quietly following the last line of sunlight disappearing behind the horizon. No footsteps of anyone else, no shadow in the room, no fear that one email or call could break the world I was building. I whispered, not loud, not for anyone else to hear, just for me. "This is the life I choose. Not for anyone else, but for myself." And in that moment I knew, true freedom doesn't begin by walking away from someone. It begins the moment you choose to stay, with yourself. Fully. Without compromise. Without conditions. Have you ever felt like I did? Gathering every ounce of courage just to let go of someone you once believed was your everything? Have you ever stayed silent thinking love meant patience? Or forgiven not because you truly could but because you were afraid to start over? If my story made you think of yourself, or someone you know, I hope you'll share your thoughts below. Because sometimes just one shared story, one moment of empathy, can be the strength someone needs when they're standing at the hardest crossroads of their life. Freedom doesn't always come from something grand. Sometimes it begins with one small act. Daring to say no, daring to keep part of your finances for yourself, daring to look at the person next to you and ask, "Am I really living for myself or just existing in someone else's dream?" If this story touched something deep within you, don't hesitate to leave a comment. I read every one. And remember to follow the channel to hear the next stories. About family, about truth, about the small things that can change everything. Because sometimes the most valuable thing isn't what we hold on to, but what we dare to let go.